All right, today we are going to tie a great flats pattern fly. It's called the Tasty Toad, invented by a fellow named Harry Spear. This is an outstanding permit pattern. It's a great bonefish pattern tied in smaller sizes, and it is an excellent tarpon fly tied in larger sizes. Feel free to mix up the color. The one I'm going to do today is a pattern that's worked very well for me in the past. It's going to be kind of a tan and chartreuse. Tasty Toad. So here we go. I'm going to start with just a kind of standard size 2 long shank saltwater streamer hook. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay a thread base, and we're going to put some lead eyes on this fly. It's important on these wide-bodied crab flies, as you see when we're finished, that you have some eyes to help it sink, help overcome the water resistance from that broad body, and get the fly to the bottom in front of the fish. So I'm going to start with some zap-a-gap, a little drop, and you'll notice I am putting these lead eyes right up next to the eye of this hook. This would be different than a gotcha or a clouser minnow. The head, I'm not going to be concerned at all with tying a head on this fly. The entire fly is going to be tied behind those eyes, so that allows it to put it up and to kind of get that fly sinking as a swimming crab would, a fleeing crab would, away from its predator. I'm going to just put a few wraps of thread on that, add another small drop of zap-a-gap, and then I'm going to whip finish this. When I tie these flies, I'll do all my eyes for as many flies as I'm going to tie. Then I will go ahead and do the bodies. Saves a lot of time that way. In the interest of time, I'm going to put this one aside, let it dry. I like for my eyes to dry before I finish the flies. I have one that we've already got the eyes dry on, and now I'm going to do the body of this fly. I'm going to start my thread roughly above the hook point and tie back to lock it on. And the tail on this fly is going to be of a couple different shades of marabou. And as you tie it, it's important to think about how this fly will be fished and how it will be presented so you get your colors right. You always want your lightest color to be on the bottom of the fly. And given the fact that we have our eyes on the top of this shank, therefore we kind of got to tie the fly upside down than we would traditionally. In my tail, tan is going to be the darkest color. So I'm going to prepare a piece of tan marabou, and you want these tails sparse. You're just trying to create some movement and activity of something swimming away. I'm going to leave that about the length of the shank. I'm just going to take a couple tight wraps to tie it on. And I'm going to leave everything long for now. We'll trim it once we have the tail complete. Now I'm going to add some marabou, and I'm just going to grab a small pinch of feathers from the side of a nice long piece of blood quill marabou. Again, sparse is good. We want wispy, we want lively. We're not trying to tie a tail on a woolly bugger. I'm going to come up about the shank of the hook, even the tips with the first bunch, and add a couple more wraps, tying that in. And now I'm going to add 2 grizzly hackle tips to the side of this fly as well. I have chosen just a typical kind of not great grade, but perfectly stiff and fine dry fly neck, and I've taken a fly from each side of the fly of this neck. The reason for that is they will all each have, if they come from the different sides, they're going to each have kind of their own natural bend and will complement each other on the shank of the hook. And you want these so they will splay out and kind of create some more motion and kind of kick away as you retrieve the fly. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just kind of strip off everything that I don't want to use. We're only really interested in the hackle tips here. I'm going to size, still a little long. You want these to be the same size as your tail. That looks like it's going to be perfect. Then I like to just kind of measure my other one against it. I'll align the hackle tips. I know then where I want to strip that material. and I will do so. Then I'm going to trim away the webby material that's left. I'm only interested in those hackle tips and the stem that's holding them together. I'm going to tie each one of these on the outside of that fly so they splay out. I'm going to just do 2 quick wraps. I'll attach one to the other side, match the tip to the one that you've previously tied in. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim this leftover marabou and hackle tip materials, the butt sections here, so they're flush with the eyes. Don't feel like you have to do it all at once. Now I'm going to bring my thread up in nice kind of concentric wraps. You're going to wrap it back so it doesn't have to be perfect. But this is going to lock everything down and is going to create the base for the body of this fly. So I wrapped up. You notice it was looser. My main goal there is just to kind of clean up the mess. You may have some leftover marabou tips you have to kind of smooth back into the body. And again, it doesn't be perfect. We'll be wrapping back up as we build the body, but you do want to lay a nice kind of solid foundation for what we're about to do next. I'm also going to add just a couple pieces of flash. This is a midge flash product, a tan midge flash. It's basically half the diameter crystal flash and about twice the twist. I think it provides an excellent little accent. And you don't want to really overdo flash on your flats flies. The main mode of camouflage is translucency or blending in, and flash does neither one. So I've tied it in 2 on one side, 2 on the other. I've then looped that midge flash and tied it back down together to lock those in place. Trim to the side. And now I'm going to do the body. And this is where it gets easy and it's kind of arts and crafts. This is Chartreuse Ice Fur. And I'm going to cut a hank that is roughly 1/8 of an inch in diameter. And you want to make sure it's fairly uniform throughout. And when you get to the end, you have these kind of long stragglers. You can go ahead and cut those out. You just want one nice kind of consistent, about 1/8 of an inch thick piece of material. And we're going to tie this in segments to make the body of this crab. I like to leave it long, leave it bushy, leave it messy. It really doesn't matter. We're going to be trimming it, and it's a lot easier to do these figure 8 wraps with a long piece of material than it is with a small one. I'm going to tie in one bunch. I'm going to trim it, and it'll be trimmed even more than this when we're finished. Get another nice long, kind of 1/8 of an inch hank. We're going to advance our thread to our next tie-in point. Go ahead and figure 8 this hank in. And you want to make sure that you kind of keep your hanks separate and different as you're tying in. The hank in front, you do not want to wrap over the fibers of the hank in the back. I'm going to go ahead, trim that. That hank I grabbed was long enough to do my next bunch. And I've actually found you still want to leave it longer, as you will see, than what the trimmed body will look like. But if you kind of do one little bit short, long clump and then a long, long clump, it's easier to keep them apart when you're doing these figure 8 wraps. Just a couple more clumps. And again, we're separating that, so it's about 1/8 of an inch. going to slide at least one more in here. And it gets a little bit harder to get clean as you get up towards the head. We've got quite a bit of fiber on here, which again is important to put some lead eyes on this pattern, get it down quickly. A couple more wraps. And again, mix up your colors. Tan is great, white is great, tan and chartreuse, different colored stripes, orange on the back. They can all be effective. So I've got 4 clumps in there now. We're up to those lead eyes. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to whip finish my thread, tie it off. So now that we've got this fly tied, it's time to trim our fly, and you're going to want to trim it in a taper, kind of almost a triangle, narrower back here by the eyes, and then kind of flaying outward towards the top. It's really best to do this kind of one hank at a time. So I'm going to measure my first hank about right off the eye, and then follow up with the hank on the other side. Now the hank in front of that is just going to be a little bit longer than that one. And on the other side, you got it, just a little bit longer than that previous one. And again, you want to be careful in this tail. You don't want to clip that nice sparse marabou and flash tail. Smidge longer. Just a smidge longer. Clean up any stray hairs you may have. You're ready to fish. The tasty toad.